Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot, page 97. A, top of the page. It's the middle of a sentence, so I'll start from 96b at the bottom. From some new idea to give context. Okay. And if you would say, this is 96b, and if you would say that the case of the showbread table is different, as here with regard to the marble-covered table, the Mishnah is referring to a permanent covering that is fixed to the table with nails, whereas there, in the case of the showbread table, the discussion is referring to a covering that is not permanent, as the gold was not attached to the showbread table with nails. This explanation is difficult, but didn't Reish Lakish raise a dilemma to Rabbi Yochanan? Is the Mishnah that discusses the marble-covered table referring only to a permanent covering, or even to a covering that is not permanent? Is it referring only to a case where one covered? Okay, now we're on 97a, top of the page. Lebiz bizav o shelo chipa es lebiz bizav. Ve'amar le lo shna tzipui omed velo shna tzipui she'eno omed lo shna chipa es lebizi bizav velo shna lo chipa lebizi bizav. The table's rim leve bazin, as well as the table itself, or on top of 97a, or even to a case where one did not cover its rim. And Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, the case of a permanent covering is not different, and the case of a covering that is not permanent is not different. Likewise, the case where one covered the rim is not different, and the case where one did not cover the rim is not different. In any case, a vessel's status is determined according to the material of the external covering, and the showbread table should be susceptible to impurity because its external covering was of gold. It is therefore not necessary to derive that the table is susceptible to impurity due to the fact that it is not designated to rest in a fixed place. וכי תימא עצי שיטים חשיבי ולא בטלי. הניח לריש לקיש דאמר לא ישנו אלא בכלי אק אס לגוס 40 מדינס היום. אבל כלי מסמס חשיבי ולא בטלי שפר. אלא רבי יוחנן דאמר כלי מסמס נמי בטלי מה יקלה ממר. The Gemara suggests another explanation, and if you would say that the acacia wood from which the showbread table is fashioned is different, as it is an important, valuable type of wood, and therefore the table's status as a wooden vessel is not negated by the fact that it was covered with gold, there would still be a difficulty. This explanation works out well, according to the opinion of Reish Lakish, who said the Mishnah taught that the status of a wooden vessel is determined according to the material of its covering, only with regard to vessels made of medium grade achshalgos wood, whatever that is, which come from overseas, but vessels made of expensive masmas wood are important, and therefore their status as wooden vessels is not negated by the covering. According to this opinion, the ruling works out well, as the acacia wood of the showbread table is also valuable. But according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who said the importance of masmas vessels is also negated by the covering, what is there to say? Shani shulchan derachmana Karye eitz, shenemar hamizbeach eitz shalosh amos, גובה אורכו 2 אמות ומקצועותיו לו ארכו קריותיו עץ וידבר אלי זה השולחן אשר לפני השם. The Gemara answers, the table was different because the merciful one called it wood. As it is stated, the altar was of wood, 3 cubits high, and its length 2 cubits, and so its corners and its length and its walls were also of wood. And he said to me, this is the table that is before the Lord. Ezekiel 41:22. This verse is referring to the showbread table, as it describes it as being made of wood. Even though the wood was not visible, this indicates that its status is like that of all wooden vessels, which are not susceptible to impurity unless they are carried both when empty and when full. פתח במזבח וסיים בשולחן רבי יוחנן ורבי אלעזר דאמר תרוויו בזמן שבית המקדש קיים מזבח מכפר על אדם, עכשיו שאין בית המקדש קיים שולחנו של אדם מכפר עליו. The Gemara challenges, why does the verse begin with the word altar and conclude with the word table, even though both terms are referring to the same item? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar both say the following interpretation: when the temple is standing, the altar effects atonement for the transgressions of a person, but now that the temple is not standing, a person's table affects atonement for his transgressions if he provides for the poor and needy from the food on his table. Arba'a snifin shel zahav hayu sham b'chulei b'nahal mili Amar Rav Katina Amar Krav Yasita K'arotav V'chapotav V'kashotav U'menakiotav. The Mishnah described the showbread table, 96a. There were 4 panels of gold there, which split up at their upper ends above the table, and there were 28 rods that rested upon the panels. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rav Katina said, the verse states with regard to the table, and you shall make its dishes and its pans, uksotav umenakiotav, with which it shall be covered of pure gold. You shall make them. Exodus 25:29. Karotav elu defusin, kapotav elu bezichin, kashotav elu snifin, umenakiotav elu konim, asher yusach bahen, שמסכסכין בהם es alechem. Rav Katina interprets the verse, its dishes. These are the molds in which the loaves are kneaded, baked, and placed after baking. See 94a. Its pans. These are the bowls for the frankincense that is placed on the table with the showbread. Kesotav. These are the 4 panels of gold. Menachot. These are the rods which rest on the notches in the panels and bear the loaves, one on top of the other, with which it shall be covered. This indicates that the bread is covered by the rods. Moisiv ravo lo isidu akonim v'lo netilatan dochachos es haShabbos v'yisol kedai dakti oiraiso amayin dochos es haShabbos. Rava raises an objection to this interpretation, which indicates that the rods are required by Torah law. The Mishnah states neither the arranging of the rods for the new showbread nor their removal from the arrangement of the old showbread overrides Shabbat. And if it enters your mind to say the rods are required by Torah law, why does their arrangement not override Shabbat? Hadar Marava Lav Milsahi Amri Ditnan Klal Omar Rabbi Akiva Kol Malacha Sheefshar La'aseh Yisab Shabbos in the Derech Shabbos V'hani Nami Efshar Doidochi Shabbos Alayhu. Rava then said that which I said, that one can infer from the Mishnah that the rods are not required by Torah law is not correct, as we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva stated in principle, any labor that can be performed on Shabbat Eve does not override Shabbat, and these actions, arranging and removing the rods, can also be performed in a manner that does not require overriding Shabbat for them, as the rods can be removed before Shabbat, and the rods can be arranged for the new loaves once Shabbat has ended. Rav explains why the rods can be arranged after Shabbat. What is the reason that the rods are required? They are necessary in order to create a gap between the loaves, so that the bread does not become moldy in such a short time period as this, from when the new loaves are placed on the table on Shabbat until the arrangement of the rods. After Shabbat, the loaves will not become moldy. Kedetanya ketzad nichnas mi'arv Shabbos v'shom tan v'nichon ha'ochel shel shulchan motzei Shabbat nichnas magbiya rosheha shel chala ומכניס כהן תחתיהו וחוזר ומגביה ראשיה של חלה ומכניס כהן תחתיו. This is as it is taught in Braita with regard to the removal and arrangement of the idols, of the rods. Why did I say idols? It's weird. This is taught in a Braita with regard to the removal and arrangement of the rods. How does the priest proceed? Removal of the idols is a great thing. Good to remove idols. Okay, anyway, how does the priest proceed? He enters the sanctuary on Shabbat Eve and removes the rods from between the loaves, and he places them in the space of 2 handbreadths between the two arrangements along the length of the table. And at the conclusion of Shabbat, he enters the sanctuary again. He raises the ends of a loaf of the showbread and inserts a rod underneath it, and again raises the ends of a loaf and inserts a rod underneath it. Arba'a chalos tzrichos shlosha kanima elyona ena tzricha ela shnayim לפי שאין עליה מסוי התחתונה אינו צריכה כל עיקר לפי שמונחס על טהרו של שולחן. The Braita continues to describe the placement of the rods. Each arrangement contains 6 loaves. The 4 loaves in the middle of the 6 require 3 for the first of the 4 middle loaves, and likewise 3 rods for each of the other middle loaves, totaling 12 rods. The upper loaf requires only 2 rods, as the weight of another loaf does not bear upon it. Each arrangement, therefore, requires a total of 14 rods, and the 2 arrangements require 28 rods. As for the lowest loaf of each arrangement, it does not require rods at all, as it rests on the table itself. Tanan Hasam Rabbi Meir Omer Kol Amos Shoy B'Mikdash Beinonios Chutz B'Mizbach HaZahav Mizbeach HaZahav V'Akeren V'Asoveh V'Hayesod. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Amat Binyan Shisha Tefachim V'Shel Kelim Chamisha. We learned in a Mishnah there in Kelim 17:10 that Rabbi Meir says all the cubits that were mentioned with regard to the temple with medium cubits, consisting of 6 handbreadths, except in the case of the following items: the golden altar, which was 1 cubit long and 1 cubit wide, each protruding quarter of the external altar, which were 1 cubit long, 1 cubit wide, and 1 cubit high, the surrounding ledge of the external altar, which was 5 cubits high and 1 cubit wide, and the base of the altar, which was 1 cubit high and 1 cubit wide. In all these cases, the cubit was of 5 handbreadths. Rabbi Yehuda says the measure of a cubit that was used with regard to the building of the temple was a cubit of 6 handbreadths, but the cubit mentioned with regard to the temple vessels, for example, the table, the candelabrum, the menorah, and the golden altar, was a smaller cubit of 5 handbreadths. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ushne mikra echad darshu, ve'ele midos hamizbeach be'amos ama v'tofach. Continuing on to 97b, v'chek ha'ama ve'ama rochav u'gevula shel sipatah saviv zeret האחד, וזה גב המזבח. חק האמה זה יסוד, Ama rochav ze sovev gvula el sipata saviv zeret ha'echad elu karanus ze gav hamizbeach ze mizbach hazahav. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan says in both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda derive their opinions from the same verse, and these are the measures of the altar by cubits. The cubit is a cubit and a handbreadth. Okay, 97b, top of the page. And the bottom shall be a cubit, and the breadth of a cubit, and its border by its edge round about shall be the one span, and this shall be the higher part of the altar. Ezekiel 43:13. The first section of the verse is referring to the outer altar. The bottom shall be a cubit. This is the base of the altar, and the breadth of a cubit, this is the surrounding ledge of the altar, and its border by its edge round about shall be the one span. These are the protruding corners of the altar, which were 1 cubit wide and 1 cubit high, and this shall be the higher part of the altar. This is referring to the golden altar, which stood inside the sanctuary, and was also measured with small cubits. Now, this is very interesting, that Ezekiel's temple is supposedly a future temple, but they're referencing the temple as if it's the past. So they're not talking about the future. So this leads me to believe that it could be a spiritual temple of the future, let's say, but it's just meant to understand the temples of the past. Just a thought. Okay, to be continued.